I'll just kind of start with the obvious in terms of, why is research important? Why do your department chairs and your deans, emphasize scholarship? And that's because as academics, our primary responsibilities is both to share knowledge through our instruction in our classrooms, but then also to create knowledge. And we create that knowledge through our scholarship. It's basically how, through our research, is how new knowledge is created and basically how man's understanding expands, how we better understand how economies and businesses and organizations operate. It's also a measure of your own talent and your productivity. It's a way that deans and chairs evaluate resumes and make hiring and promotion decisions. Also, it's how we keep current. Sort of the same way if you go to an attorney or you go to a physician, you want your physician to be current in the most recent antibiotics, your attorneys to be conversant with the most recent changes in laws. We want our faculty to be most conversant and knowledgeable about innovations in their own specialty areas. And research is one way we maintain that currency, our relevance, and it's how we establish a reputation and how we validate and provide credentials for our skill set. Challenges. We'll get more into this later on into the talk, but there's lots of challenges associated with academic research. And part of what you do in your doctoral program is learn how to navigate those challenges and how to be successful and to achieve good outcomes. I put at the top is we have to make a contribution. The study that we undertake, we need to ask an interesting research question, and there needs to be something distinctive about our study. I put in the second bullet there, and when I was an editor of the Financial Review, I would basically ask myself, why do I care about this paper? Okay, why is this paper of interest to me? And that's something you need to challenge yourself as an author, as a researcher. Why is this paper important? Early young researchers often want to describe data. They want to describe a phenomenon. And to me, that's an aspect of it, but that's not what we really do. We really want to test hypotheses. As a scientist, we're testing hypotheses and to gain insights and explanations in terms of why the world functions, why markets functions the way they are. And to do that, you typically will need in your research a theoretical framing, a model, a foundation. And again, I can't really emphasize this enough. Young scholars immediately, they tend to want to rush into the empirical work, collect data, and start running regression, start grading tables without a good foundation in terms of why we're doing what we need to do. The analogy I like to use, and I use this all the time with my own doctoral students or young scholars that I work with, is it's like building a house. You don't just go start building a house. You get blueprints. You work with the architect to have a design. And then from that design, from those blueprints, you construct your house, and a house is solid. That's an important part of that scholarship. Sometimes it slows you down a little bit because you need a framework in which to pose your question, but the dividends that it pays are incredible. There's intense competition in the journals. The very top journals, you're looking at acceptance rates of 5 to 10%. Mid-level journals, acceptance rates might be between 15 to 20, maybe 25%. So there's intense competition. You're competing now globally for space in journals. There's a premium in finding new results, okay, positive results. Confirmatory studies are not really popular. Just reestablishing or confirming something that we already know. Those papers are difficult to really publish. And where that line is between confirmatory and new, sometimes it's a little vague, and that's where you have discussions with your co-authors to really highlight what is new and what is confirmatory. New data sets, new methods, new theory, those are aspects of a study that will enhance its attractiveness. And I'm going to talk at length about interdisciplinary research because I think interdisciplinary research allows you to bring in new theory, new methods, and new data sets. Strong writing that is clear, logical, and concise. I can't emphasize conciseness enough. Some journals, even good journals, will have page limitations or word limitations. So to write concisely, to convey the essence of your argument is important. And then also, when I look at a manuscript, I also like to see the conclusion or the end of the paper. Is this what we call kind of a one-trick pony? Is this just you're just doing one study, that's it? Or does the study have potential for further research? Can it seed? Can it generate new studies to maybe launch a whole new research stream? So that in that sense, it adds to the value or the importance of your study. Okay, I'm just going to pause here one moment and simply say, as we continue this discussion, feel free to ask questions at any point in time. This is a dialogue, it's a conversation, and I don't really kind of view this as a lecture per se, but it's a dialogue between you and I about scholarship. So feel free to ask whenever. What I'd like to really focus on now with that kind of the background is to talk a little about what I think in my crystal ball, some things that I think are happening or going to happen in academic research, and something I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about. And the first of these is I think we're going to see research become increasingly interdisciplinary. And the simple question you may say, Steve, why is that so? We have these academic departments. We also have almost academic tribes. Why would you think that research should become more interdisciplinary? And I think the reason is because there's multiple advantages to the researcher. And let me elaborate. And my discipline is finance, especially corporate finance. And so a lot of my examples will come from finance, but it's equally applicable to economics. And actually, these general principles apply to most any business discipline. Sources of new theory. What I've listed here are some things that we see in a corporate finance area. There's a whole area of international corporate finance. We talk about the legal regimes, various indices for corruption and disclosure, comes from the law literature, management literature on corporate strategy, on M&A, on governance, political science with innovation, and again, industrial organization and M&A. There's a whole area in terms of social capital and network theory. Well, that doesn't come from finance per se. That theory in terms of strong networks and weak networks and strong ties and weak ties, that comes from communications, marketing, even sociology literature, psychology, a whole area of both accounting that I'm aware of, accounting and finance, talks about behavioral accounting, behavioral finance. That's basically borrows directly from psychology. We have terms like overconfidence, anchoring, risk tolerance, just a number of different phenomena, a whole area of behavioral finance. So lots of new theories that we can then test in our parent discipline. So a reason. More complex problems. I think that as you undertake interdisciplinary research, you open up the possibility for more complex problems. You have a deeper set of tools, different data, different perspectives, You can get into interactive effects. You can get into second order effects. And we're going to talk about some of the analytical techniques that you can use, but you bring a bigger tool chest, a broader set of perspectives, and you can examine more complex problems, which I'm going to talk about as the second prediction here. A variety of empirical methods and research designs. As kind of a classically trained finance professor, my training is basically statistics and econometrics. And the big hammer that we like to use, or the hammer that we put to all problems, is regression analysis of some sort. Okay. But there are techniques beyond a regression analysis that an interdisciplinary approach will introduce you to. Like textual and linguistic analysis. Again, in the finance and the accounting literature, there's lots of data in terms with annual reports and quarterly reports and disclosures and press announcements that are not in terms of numbers, but they're in terms of words. And there's information in those words, the choice of words, how the words are structured, the length, the positive, the negative. The Laughlin-McDonald dictionary, for instance, comes to mind. So linguistic analysis, survey data, where we actually talk with the actual vice presidents, we talk with the actual managers. And there's been a series of papers where they survey vice presidents and CFOs for data. Simulation techniques, anthropological studies, case studies, network analysis. One thing I didn't put down here is experimentation. Actual experimental data, which economists and psychologists have used. So my point here is that as you think about undertaking interdisciplinary research, it opens up a number of other methodologies that of possible use, new empirical tools to use, which can open up new insights and answer questions in a new and novel way. I put down here policy recommendations and analysis. Policy recommendations basically come to answer the question, so what about my research? What are the implications? What kind of behaviors should be changed? What kind of regulatory processes? What kind of laws perhaps should be changed? What kind of practices should be modified? Okay, that's what we mean by policy recommendations. And by taking an interdisciplinary approach, our policy, or the so what aspect of our analysis, can be much broader. We can, for instance, more fully incorporate technology factors, media, competitor responses, consumer, even political responses as part of that policy recommendation. Again, I think economists, classically trained economists, operate more in this space than, say, business professors do. But nevertheless, as we're going to talk about in terms of, we talk about societal impact and the importance of problems, the policy aspect of our research is going to be really important. Also, when we do research that has policy implications, it's easier to promote our research in a popular media. And I know most deans, I know I as a dean appreciate this, when my faculty's research can say something important about a business issue, about a business problem, and has something important to say, and we can get that into popular press. It enhances the stature and the visibility of my institution, and that's something we find very valuable. Interdisciplinary data. This is one of the things I really like about interdisciplinary studies is there's lots of data out there that we may not normally think about. Sometimes it's something as simple as there's new data sets. Economists play with macro data that typically in finance we don't play with, or in business we may not play with. There may be data on NGOs, non-government organizations, or privately held companies, or sectors of the economy that we don't normally think about. In business schools, we often, for instance, don't think about agricultural data, yet there's abundance of data available on that. Some data is free, some data you have to subscribe to. Also, as you look at interdisciplinary data, in business schools, we tend to focus on firm-level data. The unit of analysis tends to be the individual company. But as you go interdisciplinary, we start to look at maybe entire markets. Maybe we look at the entire economy. We may look at a subsector of the economy. Survey data. Again, in typical business schools, at least on the finance side and often on the accounting side, and even maybe into some of the economists, we tend not to use survey data. But yet surveys, if properly designed, can provide insight that our archival data doesn't do. And also in an interdisciplinary approach, you may be able to bring someone onto the team that has expertise in managing, designing, and interpreting a survey. And some other things, case studies, simulated data, experimental data, especially if you were doing something on the behavioral side. So again, interdisciplinary research introduces you to data sets that the archival researcher will not have thought about. And that can allow you to ask questions to create variables that heretofore have been unexamined. And again, I think that's exciting. And again, it feeds back into that earlier statement that I made in terms of novel, asking new questions or asking existing questions in new ways using different kinds of data. Units of analysis. The reason why I wanted to put this down is a few years ago, I was working with and talking with some of my colleagues in economics, and they like to focus on laws within states. We have 50 states here in the Union, in the United States, and they were looking at some public policy issues such as taxation, or maybe higher education, or maybe labor markets and state minimum wages. And their unit of analysis was the state. And I thought, boy, on the finance side, our unit of analysis, what we focus on is the individual company. And so it got me thinking, as we think about things interdisciplinary, what is our unit of analysis? And as we broaden our colleagues, as we broaden our perspective, the unit of analysis will vary, and it raises really interesting questions. Is it industry groups, for instance, if you do industrial organization studies, maybe you study an entire industry. I'm working on a paper right now with a set of co-authors, and we're looking at ESG responsiveness across industries, and we're using the FAMA French 12. So we're aggregating at the industry level, not at the firm level. You may look at business groups. I've done work in business groups. I've had papers done with Keiretsu, which are Japanese business groups, or Chaebols, which are Korean business groups. So it's groups of companies. Again, individual companies we already talked about, maybe specific markets. Maybe you look at a particular labor market. An equity market is popular in finance, but there's also bond markets, there's insurance markets, there's used car markets. Again, depending on what the research is. Maybe you look at specific types of companies, bankrupt companies, large companies, companies that are doing well, companies that are doing badly. You may do a national study, okay? In the EU, you may look at countries within the EU and make comparative studies based on agricultural subsidies or agricultural tax policies or business innovation or tax rates. So it may look that way. You may look at political systems. A common way I know is we look at legal regimes, common law countries versus civil law countries. but there may be other ways of classifying groups of countries based upon a political system or a political infrastructure in place that you might not normally think about if you're simply sticking to your own particular discipline. Or you may look at groups of countries. So again, the point here is the unit of analysis. Typically in your own discipline, you tend to focus on one type of analysis, whether it be the individual company or the consumer or the state or the national economy. By doing interdisciplinary research, it forces you to think about a different type of analysis, a different unit of analysis, like as I call it, and it helps to frame the research question in a different way. Challenges to interdisciplinary research. When I was at the University of Missouri, I worked for about 10 years very closely with my colleague across the yard in business. And we did a number of papers on corporate and legal bankruptcy. He was an attorney, trained as an attorney with no business training. I'm an academic, business academic with no legal training. So it took us a while to know that we're talking about the same thing. We use different words or different perspectives. So learning to talk across disciplinary boundaries is really important. It's like learning a new language. I put intellectual arrogance. Okay. A lot of times we as academics, we think our discipline is the best discipline for whatever reason, and I will have to pander or I will educate the other person, and kind of sigh, say, I guess we can probably, let me try to explain to you. You should know this, but let me explain that. You can't be arrogant. You have to open yourself up, understand you don't know what they don't know, what they know, that there's gaps in your knowledge, and you have to be open to this kind of collaboration. So it takes a kind of a mindset. In finance, we're kind of guilty as well. If we work with people in management, we say, well, your statistical techniques are naive and weak, and so we're better than you. They will turn around and say, well, in management, we have much better theory than you, and your theory is very weakly developed. Neither is correct. You work together as a team, and you build on the strength of both. Choosing the empirical tools. Again, as human beings, we tend to like the familiar. So we want to, as a finance person, I will put everything into a regression model. That may not be the best approach. Here's the problem. If it doesn't go into a regression approach, then I have to learn a new technique. That requires work and effort on my part. But that's what interdisciplinary work, good interdisciplinary work involves. You have to learn the other theory. You have to learn the other empirical techniques to choose a technique or tool that's best equipped to answer the problem you're trying to solve. Design issues, what theory you're going to use, what sample you're going to use, what's going to be the unit of analysis. And again, that's kind of back and forth. And a big challenge here in all this is avoid what is comfortable and common to you and focus on how can I answer the question best. And so some things I will have to learn, some things I will know and just use that. But you have to come again with this open mind. Otherwise, it doesn't really work out. A big one is contribution. You have to clearly state the contribution. What literature do you want to position this at? Interdisciplinary work can be difficult to place because you have to identify the contributions, what literature to cite. Frankly speaking, some journals are more open to interdisciplinary work, others less so. So once you choose a journal, if it's interdisciplinary in nature, you have to be very careful how you identify your contribution and what literatures it will contribute to. That's related to where do you publish it at. And the last one I put is, we shouldn't put this down here, but that's a reality, because all good research contributes to knowledge, right? But you want to make sure that it counts in your own promotion and tenure process, whatever internal processes you have to assess performance. So if I'm a finance professor and I place it in a marketing journal, how is that rewarded? Because again, we respond to incentives, and I think that's a discussion you would have, with your administration. But I know in my college, good work, regardless of where it's published, if it's good, strong scholarship, we find a way to make it count. My second prediction is something about the need to respond to what I call grand, complex, or wicked problems. Grand, complex, or wicked problems. And this is partly driven by this need for societal impact. What I have up here is AACSB, and that's the Association for the Advancement of Collegiate Schools of Business. It's not the only accrediting body of business schools, but it's very prominent, and it's an international body. Here in North America, it is the prominent accreditor of business schools. Across the world, there are competitors to this, but the reason why I put this up is this is in our new 2020 standards for accreditation. I've highlighted this societal impact. How does scholarship, the research that we do, what are some of the implications, or how does it have a positive impact on society? Now, and I'll be honest here, I'm a little at times conflicted about this, because a lot of good research is basic research, and the implications for society are not immediately obvious. Maybe the implications for society occur in the future, or it spawns other research. Having said that, nevertheless, it's out there, and so talking about relating your studies to impact on society is something that increasingly is going to be, we need to consider. What's a grand, complex, or wicked problem? Okay, it's often interdependent, multi-causal. There's not necessarily just one reason for it. Sometimes there's a solution that's possible. Okay. There may be unforeseen consequences. The key part here as a researcher is this last point: straddles organizational, market, and institutional boundaries. Another way of saying this as the researcher is these grand, complex problems will often straddle academic disciplines or disciplinary boundaries. Okay. So just to kind of give you a feel, and I'm not going to read all these. These are just issues here in terms of to kind of shape your mind when I talk about a wicked problem. Any of these are wicked problems. Okay? They straddle boundaries. There's not an easy solution, many causes for them. What I'm suggesting here through these comments, the punchline here is, to the extent that you can motivate your research as contributing towards our understanding of these, gives you an advantage, I think, in a market for ideas. And let me just belabor a little bit on this. Okay, a couple points. Is you're never going to solve in one study, even if it appears in your top journal, it appears in Academy of Management Journal or AER or Journal of Finance, you're not going to fix the grand problem. Yours is going to be a tiny stone in the mosaic of the solution. A tiny stone in the mosaic of the solution. But that is a contribution, nevertheless. Some things that you can do when you work with wicked problems. Obviously, as I said, you can use the existence of a wicked problem to help motivate your paper, to help you identify your contribution in the paper. I think you can offer, perhaps the results of your study is you offer a partial policy solution. Perhaps you showed new relationships or new dimensions of the problem that weren't identified before. Maybe you help simplify a part of the problem. Maybe it becomes less wicked than people before. Maybe you identify processes or technologies that, if properly implemented, could begin the process of policy solution. So again, the focus here is not on the entirety, it can't be done, but a part of that. And so it helps you identify a solution, the contribution, the relevance, and the importance of your research. That's how I think about wicked problems. My third one I want to talk about, and maybe spend the most amount of time, is the research process itself, both in terms of the process and how we do research. One is the fact that I'm coming to you today, that I'm chatting with my colleagues over there in Brno, and we're talking about research, to me is prima facie a case for globalization of research, that relationships will be established, ideas will be exchanged that we couldn't have done even 10 years ago, or it would have been complicated to do. So the technology makes this possible. There's also, with grants, increasingly, if you're doing funded research, the incentive to internationalize is embedded in the grants itself. I just got through talking about grand or wicked problems. Typically, these problems have international dimensions to it. They require an international perspective, or they require international data to fully answer the question. A lot of times, researchers become nationalistic, or they become just blind. They focused on, well, I want to focus on North America, or I want to focus on the EU, and I don't care about the rest of the world. Well, that's kind of limiting in terms of the impact of your research, and also the attractiveness to editors. I put greater access to data and research talent. With international conferences, electronic conferences, with the seminar here, with these international enabled by technology, the international education that can occur allows us to create teams of researchers that we couldn't think about before. And you get different perspectives, different skill sets, and I think it makes for much more wonderful and actually much more meaningful and impactful scholarship. Open access publication, okay, that has really, again, opened up the diffusion of knowledge, diffusion of research across boundaries. And then lastly, so many things that we talk about that involve culture, tax policy, regulatory authorities, markets, they require an international perspective to really answer the question, or to provide the rigor in the analysis. And so my predictions here in terms of research will become increasingly globalized, both in terms of content, data, methods, and people. I think you're going to see more impact on societal and environmental impact. Again, I'm not going to belabor this point, but this kind of flows through my earlier point here in terms of societal impact, the need for societal impact in scholarship, or desire for it, and that will be reinforced. Something I want to talk about is AI in the review process, and global, AI is very real. I mean, it's less than a year old now. We use it, as a matter of fact, how real it is. I was on a conference call with 3 co-authors the other day. One was in Atlanta, Georgia. One was in Michigan, and I was here in Pennsylvania. And a question came up and we logged on in real time. He shared his screen. We pulled up ChatGPT, and we started quizzing it. And I almost felt that we had a fourth co-author. I had my two co-authors, myself, and almost like ChatGPT was almost kind of like a fourth co-author, as it were, in terms of as we were thinking about this. But before I talk about AI in research, let me talk a little about AI in the review process. I think you're going to see it being used to automate initial screenings. Editors are all over the place. Some have very rigorous screenings. We call it the desk reject. But the reality here is that they don't want to overburden their referees. And so how can we're looking for editorial fit, and they can do that. AI can be used to identify potential contribution and impact. How does it relate to the existing literature? Also, from a manuscript management perspective, are there potential conflicts of interest between a reviewer and an author? And that's a good thing. We could also use AI to review errors in the review process in the reviewer report that's provided back. I think you're going to see AI be used to provide more customized feedback to authors. Also, it'll be used as part of the desk reject to screen for plagiarism, maybe even used to suggest revisions. Down here, and this is something I don't have a good answer for, but it's something that would keep me up at night, is when will AI be used to write the reviews? I hope we don't get to that point, but it's something to think about. Anyway, let me talk a little about use of AI in research, because it's very real. And I put in italics here, ethical considerations foremost. I think we're on a forefront here in terms of establishing what are the ethical guidelines for the use of AI in research. What do we need to disclose? You know, what is ours versus what's its analysis? But having said that, how can AI be used? I think already researchers are using it to do literature review, use it to pull down data. I was looking at a paper. It was posted. It was a September 2023 paper, and it was on using they were measuring director quality. It was a corporate governance paper, and they were using AI to obtain biographical information about corporate directors, and then using this information that they gathered, running it through textual analysis to come up with an assessment of soft skills that these directors had, and then relating to soft skills of directors, like say critical thinking or people skills, and related it to various corporate behaviors like merger and acquisition activity and performance. Obviously, and I'm going to show you an example right here, is hypothesis generation and cross-disciplinary connections, especially when you're doing interdisciplinary research. Okay, your doctorate, your training is in a particular discipline. How do you build bridges to other disciplines? You know, AI can be a partner that way. Meta-analysis and pattern recognition in terms of using it for the data. One thing I know, I have colleagues already doing this. It used to be that you would send a manuscript out to colleagues and you would ask for feedback, and they would email you or snail mail you comments back. Hey, you missed this paper, or do more of this, less of that, but it would be feedback. Now I know faculty are loading manuscripts into AI programs, and it's picking up just not only the grammar errors, but it's also identifying missing citations, incomplete argumentation, and in some cases, suggestion for further work. So again, we're on the cusp of this, but in terms of using it to review it before it's sent out, I think is going to be happening. I made this slide last night, and just to give you an example, and I wanted to chat GP, and I just wanted to play with this. So I did something very simple in the area of corporate finance, something very basic, something that I knew about to sort of see how valid it was. And the question was, so I was asking Chet, what are some hypotheses regarding a firm's governance structure and its financial performance? So how does firm governance, the quality of its directors, the quality of its management, affect financial performance? Clearly, there's going to be lots of thoughts on that. That's a core principle of corporate finance. And again, first pass through it pops off with agency cost. And that's, the whole Jensen mechanism, that's one of our bedrock, hypotheses and theories. And it goes on to other ones. And I did not drill down further and beat on it as I could. But just this, I wanted to show an example in terms of how AI can be used to start to develop the research stream, the research questions, the hypotheses that researchers are going to be doing. And again, I'm not saying this is good, it's bad. I'm saying this is where it's going. And I don't know where it's going to be in 5 years, but it's moving along. It's something for us to be aware of. Also, with regards to research in the future is reproducibility and transparency. Basically, with technology now, people want to see your data. They want to be able to replicate it. A couple of years ago, there was I call it the replication crisis. They did a lot of policing of studies in psychology, and some of these studies in psychology results could not be replicated. So with open data, open access, greater transparency, so we prevent things like this happening. Okay. There's something called the Brattle Prize, which is leading a major prize in corporate finance in a journal of finance. And in 2020, the Brattle Prize was awarded to some researchers at Duke University, risk management and financial institutions. The results could not be replicated. And when the authors were asked for the data had disappeared. It had been lost, in quotation marks. Okay. So the prize, they surrendered the prize. It was retracted. A poster child here for what could go wrong in terms of data transparency and data reproducibility. New models of peer review. We are not there yet, but these are at the margin. Right now, we send things out. It's either single or double blind review, which means in any case, you do not know the name of the referee. Sometimes the referee knows who you are, sometimes they don't. And in many cases, the referee acts as a gatekeeper. And typically, if the referee is not happy, usually an editor will not overrule the referee and your paper is rejected. You're not given a chance to revise and resubmit. And if you've been in this business any time at all, there's many cases where you get frustrated over this because you say, gosh, the points that the referee raised, I could fix them if he'll give me a chance, but you're not given a chance. So there's open ideas bubbling around. Some of these will stick, some of these won't stick. Some of these we see in other disciplines, but I just want to put them out right now in terms of things that may emerge, that may change during your lifetime as an academic. Open peer review manuscripts are posted, and people are invited to comment on those. Those comments are basically I call it crowdsourced peer review, open peer review. I'm viewing these are pretty much the same, where basically the manuscript is posted anonymously. Comments are obtained. Those comments are synthesized by an associate editor, and a decision is made based upon that. It's not sent out to one particular review. Some cases, You'll get reviews after the manuscripts have been published. It's an interesting one. Collaborative peer review is where the both the referee and the author know each other's identity. Inviter and the author and the reviewers are invited in to work with the author to produce a publishable manuscript. Think of the relationship you have with your dissertation advisor. That's kind of what the model is here, where author submits a paper, reviewers are invited in, and depending on the extent of the collaboration, the reviewers actually join them as a co-author. Registered reports, this is an intriguing idea. It's used in the natural sciences. You basically submit a proposal. Proposal with theory, the data, the hypotheses you want to test, everything but the results. If they like the idea, they publish the paper regardless of what you find. If it's good theory, interesting research questions, strong data, they publish it regardless of what you find. And this would be a major change because typically, at least in the business disciplines, you typically need significant results, new results, for it to be published. And then combinations of these things. So there's different models of peer review that are emerging right now. But presently, it's a single or double blind review is the most common way. These other ones are in large ways in their infancy, but you may see them as your career progresses, and I wanted to speak to them. Very briefly, as I kind of move towards wrap up, just my personal views on what will be successful in this new world. Interdisciplinary, be open to new ideas, get beyond your academic tribal boundary, develop communication skills so that you can communicate your research to non-experts. This gives you the visibility across disciplines that's useful. I said develop an online presence, promote yourself, network with people across the world. I said research is global, so an online presence will allow you to do that. Be open, constantly reinvent yourself with new technologies, with new methods, new data. Focus your broad knowledge, your underpinning with some specialization, and then look for linkages to help motivate it to the big problems facing the world today. Lastly, in terms of the changing nature of research, I kind of already said this, so I'm saying it again because I'm so convinced of its truthfulness. I call it GITCH. I needed an acronym, but global interdisciplinary, team-oriented, complex, and high-impact focused research. Okay. I like these pictures, but I think this traditional view, sort of the research that when I started my doctoral program, probably for many of the students here on this call were born maybe, it was very disciplined. It was small teams, maybe you an advisor, maybe you and a classmate, very basic research, no real implications or linkages to societal problems, and important, slow discovery and diffusion of findings. Back in the day, manuscripts would be sent out by snail mail, and referees' reports were received by snail mail. Okay. That's not the world today. The world today is more like this. We're talking today. I'm here in the United States. You're over there in Bruno. Rapid discovery, wide diffusion of results. Like, as a matter of fact, I just quoted today a paper that was published it was a working paper, not even published, but it was posted on a website for the European Corporate Governance Institute with a date of September of 2023. Okay. I'm sure if I looked, I'd find papers published or posted there in October this month. So that's the world that you're living in. And finally is we have changing expectations for research. There'll be changes in how we do research, changes in how we're going to be evaluated and disseminated, changes in what we investigate, and changes in the skills needed to be successful. But I'm going to leave with one thought, and something I shared with every doctoral student I ever mentored, every doctoral seminar I ever taught, and that was the one thing that won't change is be successful as an academic scholar, as an academic researcher. You either have to possess or develop intellectual curiosity. Keep asking why. If you don't see the novelty or have that curiosity, then research becomes a burden. So if you're not innately curious, develop that curiosity. And to me, with that curiosity, that will be the foundation on which you can be successful academic researchers, and you make it fun.